Okay, good afternoon. So Jessie had a baby boy on Thursday, so she's a little bit occupied right now. So um, this is going to be informal, so if you do have some questions during the presentation, be glad to answer them, and there's also going to be a time at the end, for more questions. Yes?
Boy or girl?
Boy. So, this is the 2016 Northwestern Hawaiian Islands monk seal field update, and our field season this year was from April until August, and so we're just now sort of cleaning up and working on the data from the field season. So, each year we send out Northwestern Hawaiian Islands assessment and recovery camps, and typically we send them out to 5 locations. It's French Fricas Shoals, Laysan Island, Lisiansky, Pearl and Hermes, and Curie Atoll. And when our ships go out to deploy our field camps, they'll also be stopping at other places during the cruises in order to do like one day or several day assessments of the population, particularly at Nihoa and Moku Manamana and Midway Atoll. So what are our objectives? We want to tag and measure all the weaned pups as soon as possible after they wean from their mothers, and typically if we can do it within 2 weeks, that's good because the pups are at their fattest at that point, and if we wait longer, then they'll be getting thinner and we won't be able to use that data to see the condition of the pups in that year. We also want to identify all the individual seals in each subpopulation and conduct systematic beach counts, documents births, deaths, and injuries, and collect specimens and samples. And we also remove marine debris that's entangling, dangerous for either seals or other wildlife every year as much as we can, and mitigate other threats. And this is the core stuff that we do every year. However, we also have special projects. So as far as preparations go, we spend around a month here in Honolulu before the field season in order to not only train people, but also pack all the gear and supplies, which really is quite extensive. So typically we have 6 days of small boat training for the field staff, wilderness first aid for 3 days. We also train them in data collection, animal handling, specimen collection, necropsy, and a host of other activities that they're going to be taking a part of. And there's lots of preparations. You can imagine if you were going to be deployed for many months at a time, there's no resupply, there's no opportunity to go to the store. So you need to pack enough food for 14 people for 4 or 5 months, depending on how long the field season is going to be. And not only all the food, but all the living equipment, scientific equipment, stuff that will be used in case there's an emergency, the boat supplies. So this is really a large undertaking, and most of the gear goes into 5-gallon buckets. Everything that goes out there needs to be treated as quarantine gear because we don't want to have any insects or seeds be introduced to the islands because of our activities. So for instance, if we buy cookies that are in a box, we take them out of the box and just use the little sleeve that's the inside wrapper. And then we put that into a bucket. So this is, we have strict protocols for all of our packing, and then everything that could be frozen will be frozen after it's packed. Things that cannot be frozen, then we bug bomb them, power wash them, and other things like that. So this just shows some of our packing and doing massive shopping at a store. So, but it is very interesting, and it makes you realize all the things that you need in order to survive out in an isolated place. So then after that, after the preparations, we spend a day or two at least loading the ship. And we have a 20-foot container that we put all the buckets in. Oops, sorry, they went wrong direction. Uh-oh. Okay, and then larger equipment, for instance, the boats, the refrigerators, and things like that, we crane onto the ship. So this shows last year from April 17th through August 26th, we had 131 field days, and depending on the site, more or less days, because some sites are closer to Honolulu and the field staff get deployed sooner. And so we had 14 field staff. Depending on the site, we might only have 2 people at an island or up to 4 people. Some of the sites also have other agencies. They might have DLNR is up at Curie, and they might have maybe 6 people up there. So our sites, again, French Frigate Shoals, Laysan, Lisiansky, Pearl and Hermes Reef, and Curie. And we have 2 ships, the Hi'ialakai and the Oscar Elton Seti. And these are repurposed Navy surveillance ships, and they're 224 feet long and 43 feet wide, and they have a draft of 17 feet. So these ships can't get in really close to the islands, and almost all the islands do not have any pier or anything in order to dock up to. So the ships have small boats. They have either inflatables or safe boats or dive boats. And so everything has to go over the side of the ship into the small boats in order to get to shore. So this just shows people loading things into the small boats. And we always have a first off bucket that has some water and food and sunscreen and radios that goes with the first boat that goes ashore. And we start trying to get people ashore as soon as possible so that as the small boats are going from ship to shore, there are other people on the shore that are putting up the tents, getting the radio communications going, getting some of the other really important communication or equipment going that's necessary before the ship leaves. So this may take, usually takes just 1 day, but the ship might be there up to 2 days, depending on the site and the cruise schedule. So this is at Laysan, Lisiansky, and Pearl and Hermes. There are no buildings, and so the camps are strictly tent camps. Every person has an individual personal tent, and we also have a tent for cooking and a tent for office. So, you know, that's our typical camp. We have propane for the stove and also for a small little refrigerator, and we also have a solar freezer. However, most of the food is in buckets. It's like canned food or dried food. So this just shows typical camp life. Now, there's, as far as bathing goes, people bathe in the ocean and they wash their clothes and they wash their dishes and everything in the ocean. And so there isn't much fresh water. There's only the water that we bring with us, which we give people 5 gallons per person per day. And so that's really for brushing your teeth and cooking and things like that. So everything else is using salt water. So you wash your hair in salt water, and pretty much everything is using salt water. Yes?
Would you repeat that rations again? I mean the water. How much?
5 gallons per person per day. Now, when I was out there, it was only 1 gallon per person per day, but things are getting a little cushy out there, I would say. So, anyway.
Is that a seal in the left hand?
Yes. So the seals are very much in the environment. I was out there at Laysan Island this summer just for a short period of time, and there was a case where a female seal and a male came up right next to my tent, and I had to like sneak in. It was really hard to get into my tent for several days. And then they were just right on the other side of the tent, snorting and doing other things. So, made it hard to sleep. So, all right. There's also 2 locations, French Frigate Shoals and Curie, that have buildings, a few buildings on site. French Frigate Shoals used to be a Coast Guard station. Well, both French Frigate and Curie were Coast Guard stations in the past. French Frigate Shoals has quite a bit of infrastructure. However, most of it was damaged or destroyed. In 2012, there was a big storm and a strange occurrence called a microburst, which was like a little tornado that destroyed their living quarters. And so where people live now is in either the warehouse or tents that we have on the runway. And there is a runway at French Frigate, but it's non-functional. And at Curie, also it was an old Coast Guard station, and so there's one building that people use for office and also for the kitchen, and then people live in tents. At least our people live in tents. So at French Frigate and Prone Hermes, those are boating camps, and French Frigate Shoals is around 20 miles across, and it has 7 major islands. So there's quite a bit of boating to get from one place to the next. Prone Hermes is around 15 miles across, and it has 5 major islands. So both of these sites, it's very weather dependent whether you can get out and do the work that you need to do. Curie is also an atoll. However, it just has 2 very small little islets that are within view of the main island, so we don't have a boat up there. So this just shows some of the work that we did up there this year. Not only are we assessing the population, but whenever there's a problem with a seal, we intervene if we can in order to increase their chance of survival. And this year we did 23 interventions, and most of those occurred at French Frigate Shoals and involved translocating pups as soon as possible after they weaned from their birth islet, which most of the birth islets have a lot of shark presence. There's a Galapagos sharks that have learned to target the pups at those locations. And so as soon as the mother leaves, we translocate them from trig or the gins or these islets that are dangerous to Turn Island, which is less dangerous for the pups. Yes?
Is that 11 translocation off the island or both ways?
We just move them one direction from the little islet that's more dangerous to the other islet that's less dangerous. However, once they start moving around, they can go all over the atoll easily by themselves. This is just while they're very naive and not very mobile, we get them out of the place where there's a lot of sharks. You can see there are a lot of other types of interventions we do. For instance, disentangling seals. Yeah, sometimes their umbilical cord does not detach and they end up with the placenta sort of in the water and dragging them out to sea. So if that happens, we will come in and cut the cord if we can. Sometimes the mothers and pups get sort of separated, and we have to put them back together. So there are things that we do just because of the length of the field season that we may see situations where we can help out. So this is one entanglement we had at Lisiansky Island, where a very tight net was around the neck of an adult male. And you can see that it was really embedded into the flesh, and there was no way that was going to come off. Now, when we deployed our people at Lisiansky Island, we just deployed 2 people, and they're not able, 2 people aren't able to take care of a situation like this. But luckily, they saw the problem, and the seal was ashore when the ship came back. The ship was going up to deploy all the camps, and it was coming back down, and the seal was on shore at the time that the ship came back down, and so we had enough people to deal with the entanglement. So here's the crew, most of them coming in from the ship, and they herded the seal up the beach, and then we had a vet, and she sedated the seal and was able to cut the line off of the seal. And here's the seal after the line was cut. And you can see it's going to have a scar, which will make it very easy to identify from now on. So that's one positive, I guess. So this is an unusual, now if you study seals long enough, they will always do something strange that you will not expect. And so this is an eel that somehow went either into the nose of the pup, we don't know how, or maybe the pup had swallowed it and it came, regurgitated and went up the nose. Who knows? We have no idea exactly how this happened, but it did happen. And I'm going to show a video of that.
Oh, wait, not this one. One second. Oh, sorry.
And the pup was seen after that and was okay. It just had a little blood on its nostril in the first half of it. It was seen throughout the season. And this just shows what else they can get into. This was at Midway this week. You never know what you're going to see when you go around the island. Okay, besides the interventions that the field people do as they're just out there and they see a problem that's developed, we also have the capacity to rehabilitate seals that are underweight or emaciated. And starting in 2014, a monk seal hospital was opened in Kona on Hawai'i Island. And since that time, they've rehabilitated 19 seals and 14 weaned pups, 4 yearlings, and a 5-year-old is either gone through their system or is there now. 16 females and 3 males. Now we concentrate on females wherever possible because they're the ones that will be having pups and are the limiting resource as far as pup production goes. And so, but we will rehabilitate males also if we have the space and ability. So 15 have been successfully released to the wild, and 7 of these were released this past season. So, and 5 of the 8 are still alive, or at least we've seen them in 2016. And we have 4 that are currently undergoing rehabilitation. So these are some of the ones that we rehabbed and released this spring. And the first 3 that I'll talk about are from French frigate shoals. And you can see a before and after. Now this middle picture, I don't really think that's a before picture. It just happened to get in there, but she doesn't look very skinny in that picture. So what we do when we release them is we do a soft release, which means that we bring them back to the island and we put them within a pen or an enclosure for a few days to just get them sort of acclimated before we let them go, so they don't just suddenly start swimming off into space. So this is there's a seawall at French frigate shoals where the water comes in through the seawall, and we've utilized that to make like a little enclosure that has some water in it for the rehabs that we release at French frigate. So this is Kilo. Okay, the French frigate shoals animals I just showed you, they were caught at French frigate shoals at the end of 2015 in September when we were pulling our camps. And so we released them back at French frigate. And if possible, we release them where they're caught so that they go back to their natal spot. Kilo was born on Ni'ihau. And she was extremely, extremely thin and actually looked like a newborn pup when we did our Ni'ihau survey last year. On examination, she was probably older than that. She was not, however, there was a dead adult female that was on the same beach, and so it's possible that that was the mother that had died. Anyway, she was in quite critical condition, and so she was helicoptered off of Ni'ihau to Kauai, and then the Coast Guard brought her down to Kekeola on the Big Island. And you can see the after picture. She was quite robust. We were going to release her back at Ni'ihau as the ship passed going up the chain. However, the weather was not... we weren't able to do it because the weather was too bad and would have been dangerous. So we had her, and we decided to release her at Laysan Island, which is where I was. So I was involved with her release. So we brought her to Laysan Island, and we put her in a beach pen for several days. And then we released her, and she remained around Laysan for a couple days, and then we didn't see her again. And so we didn't know what was going on with her. However, all the seals that were released were satellite tagged. And so by following the satellite tag, we found out that she went to a seamount. She was probably following some other seal. And so she went like way offshore to a seamount, and we were very worried about her that she would not find her way back to land. However, she ended up going to Lisiansky Island. She was probably following another seal there too. So Lisiansky is maybe like 150 to 200 miles away from Laysan. And she remained around Lisiansky for the rest of the season. Okay, there are also 2 rehabs that were picked up from Lisiansky and were then released back at Lisiansky, Puka and Neva. And there was also a pup up at Curie that had been actually had been weaned early in the 2015 season and somehow survived and was prematurely weaned and very small, somehow survived all the way through the season. And so we picked her up in August and then rehabilitated her and put her out again this year. So at the end of 2016, when we were picking up our camps, we also picked up 4 pups or juveniles or older seals that were in need of rehab. And we had our field people were out there looking and evaluating. We were talking back and forth about who we should pick up or not. So we picked up a weaned female pup, a weaned male pup from Laysan, a yearling from French Frigate, and also a 5-year-old from French Frigate. Now this 5-year-old is the oldest seal that we've ever tried to rehab, and she had been thin for several years, and but was in declining condition this year, and we felt that she wouldn't survive another year. And she's also valuable because she's just around at that age where they can start pupping on their own. The earliest age of first reproduction in the Northwestern Hawaiian Islands is 5 years old. Here in the main islands where there's more forage, it's 4, but most of them reproduce a little bit later than that. But anyway, if we can get her rehabbed and get her in a really good condition, she's very valuable because she survived up to this age. So now I'm just going to talk about some of the other things that we did besides seal work up there in the Northwestern Hawaiian Islands. We collaborated with the Marine Debris Program, and for several weeks before we got up to Midway, the Marine Debris team was up there. They were collecting debris from both the land and in the water, in water debris. So then when our ship got up there, they loaded a bunch of their debris on the ship, plus on the way back down, they were collecting debris from all of the islands as we came down the chain, either debris that they were collecting themselves or debris that our people had collected over time. So in all, they were able to get 24,000 pounds of debris from the environment and actually get 20,000 back to Honolulu. Now, the ship was overloaded and couldn't take it all in, so you know, some of the debris was left out there in these big bagsters, and we're hoping to pick them up when the ship goes back out this coming season.
Excuse me, this debris was on land or in the ocean?
Some of it was in the ocean, and some of it was on land. The debris team, they are divers, and so they were collecting some from the ocean itself, you know, mostly near Midway, but also at Port Hermes. But a lot of derelict fishing gear, you know, nets and lines and things, they actually come up on the islands. So also April 30th is Earth Day, or was Earth Day. And so we've been partnering with Sustainable Coastlines, which is a nonprofit that does debris cleanup on beaches. And so anyway, our people, in collaboration with them, we at all of our different field locations, we collected debris on April 30th. So we had the first archipelago-wide marine debris cleanup. So. Yes? They weren't collecting glass, they were just collecting plastics and, you know, nets and lines and things. Now,
But the glass floats.
the glass floats have various places they go to. Yeah. Some are collected and given to like Fish and Wildlife to distribute and things like that. So. So we had this artist in residence this year, which I just wanted to highlight. She was one of our field volunteers. So she was actually doing our field research out there with us, but she wanted to really look at the interaction between, humans and ecological studies and wildlife. And she concentrates on pinhole photography and glass etching. And so she was doing monk seal work and also doing her own artwork at the same time. So this is just looking at some of the photos that she took. And here's some more. And we asked her to write a little bit something about her feelings about her time out there. And she says, "I feel like I learned everything all over again. How to look, see, think, breathe, walk the earth, live. Every moment was so full of life and death that one cannot help but be in complete awe of time. And how fortunate it is to be alive. Quite literally, every single moment was filled with an amazing sort of wonderment that I'm not sure can be described into words, but hopefully in art." So. Also at Liziansky this year, we started a vocalization study to get some sort of just to characterize all the different vocalizations the different sizes and sexes of seals make. And here it looks like a boobie's getting in on the action. So while we were out there, we do try to stop at Nihoa and Mokumana whenever we can. Actually, we hadn't been able to stop at Mokumana for several years just because it was too rough when we would be passing in the ship. But this year we were able to get one survey there. There's just preliminary numbers from there. We also partner with the Nihoa Ranch. When we were passing by, we do a survey with their facilitation, and so we were able to do that. And this is just preliminary 2016 population numbers of animals identified and numbers of pups born. Survival this year, between last year and this year, was fairly good at the western end of the chain. However, it wasn't that good at French Frigate and also at Laysan. Laysan usually has really good survival, but this past year it was almost as low as French Frigate Shoals, which traditionally has low survival. So we're hoping next year will be better. So in summary, we deployed 14 people, 5 sites for 131 days, and we transported 20,000 pounds of debris back to Honolulu. Released rehabilitated seals, brought in more rehabilitated seals, and did interventions to increase the chance of survival for animals, and also everybody came home safely, so that's good. And that's the end.
Any more questions for Thea?
I'll start over here. Yes?
The 14 people that go, how do you decide how they pick? Who are they?
Well, they apply, and so we go through a regular. They are JIMAR, which is Joint Institute of Marine and Atmospheric Research, with the UH. So we contract through JIMAR, and announcements are set out, and then people apply. And so we have field camp leaders and assistants and also volunteers. And so, depending on experience and ability and everything, those are the 3 tiers of people that may go out in the field. Yes?
Early this year, there was an announcement that there seems to be a turnabout in the monk seal population. for Hawaii, but they didn't split what's happening in the main islands. There's an increase on the leeward islands. So what's happening in your areas with, is there a turnaround?
Well, I don't think we can actually say there has been a turnaround. We released new population estimates, and now we're saying 1,300 seals, and we used to say 1,100. However, that has to do with how we're doing estimates, and we feel like we have better estimates of places where we don't typically go, like Niihau, Nihoa, and Mokumanamana. So that's adding those places in. It doesn't mean that the population actually increased any. It's just a different way of estimating. However, the Northwestern Hawaiian Islands has been dramatically in decline. Now that looks like it might be sort of mellowing out, but we don't have enough years to be able to say, is it going to actually be flat or start going up? And then the main Hawaiian Islands has been increasing. However, again, I would say that increase is not as strong as it was. And so putting all that together, it may be stable now between those two different population trends, but we can't really say it's increasing. We'll have to get a few more years of data to say that. Yeah.
Pups that were taken because they're malnourished and they're brought up on the main islands and then repopulated. Does it show like they want to stay there?
Usually when we release with the pups, they tend to stay where we put them back. But we try to put them back in the same place where they were taken from. And so they seem to have more of a tendency to stay then because they have some familiarity with that location. Kilo was a different case because she came from Niihau and we put her up to the Northwestern Hawaiian Islands. However, she was so young, I don't think she would have had any experience, meaningful experience at Niihau. Other questions? Yes?
Do you anticipate doing any other surveys with other species that besides monk seals? Is there any type of effort to do something with another type of endangered species?
Well, we're a monk seal research program, so our own program just concentrates on monk seals. However, since the early 1980s, we also do at the same time we're doing surveys for monk seals, we're doing surveys for the green turtle. And we also, this past year, we partnered, the turtle program sent up 2 people that were embedded within our camp at French Frigate Shoal. So they were doing turtle work and we were doing monk seal work. And at Laysan Island, because Fish and Wildlife is no longer out there, our people were doing duck surveys, the Laysan duck. And not last year, but the year before, Laysan, French Frigate Shoal, Fish and Wildlife asked us to do vegetation and insect surveys at several places. So we do, where we can, help out with other species. Yeah. Yes?
I'm wondering if you understand the initiation, the reason for the initiation. Is it the fishing, or do you have an understanding of why that's happening?
Well, there's no fishing allowed in the Northwestern Hawaiian Islands, and so it's not due to overfishing. It's possible, in the past things were disturbed in such a way that, they haven't recovered or something, but currently there's no fishing up there. And actually, seals down here, where there is fishing, are doing a lot better. There are different theories. One theory is that because of all the predators up there that are eating the same food as the monk seal, like alua and different sharks, that that causes there to be a lack of food. And the sharks in the Alua actually follow the seals around. We've done is critter cam, where we put videotape video cameras on the backs of the seals, and we can see that sharks and jacks actually follow the seals around, and when the seals get something from under a rock, they bump them and try to steal their food from them. So I think there's just a lot of competition up there, and there are a lot more seals up there for the amount of habitat. So it's probably competition within the seals and also between seals and other species up in the Northwest. And maybe also, it's not as productive up there as it is down here. More questions? Yes?
I have a question, and, they say that sharks benefit the environment. They say clean the ocean. What benefit do these snow seals have? Is there one?
Well, they're a part of the environment. And so, I can't say exactly what benefit. I mean, maybe they clean the ocean too, like the sharks, but, they have their own niche, and they probably also, they're spreading nutrients around and things like that.
They are predators.
Yeah,
They're
they're,
natural predators of the ecosystem, just like sharks.
Of what?
Of the ecosystem.
yeah. Yeah, they have a very similar niche as a shark, so probably the same benefit that a shark would cause, a monk seal would also. Yes?
How high was the monk seal population, the numbers? How high was the population have to be for them to be not considered as endangered or threatened?
Now, I forget what that number was, but I think it was at least like twice as many seals as there are now. But I would have to look that up. We're so far below it right now. Yes.
We're gonna seal that have the eel and the nose, or nose. You guys have a lottery. It's gonna happen again.
Well, in over 30 years of the program, that's the first time. So might be quite a few years. But they always seem to do something new and different.
They all have eels in their nose.
Well, thank you so much.
Okay.